Bonjour. Hola. Namaskar. Hello. Dobry dzień. Do you think we should start or should we wait a little bit? Wait a little bit.
Some people want to come up like Coach, but just make sure you hold it really close, yeah?
Okay. Hello, everybody. Hello, people online.
Hello.
I'm glad there's a few of us because this session is not a presentation, it's a conversation. So if you want to join the conversation, join. I'm very thankful for the space. It's quite important for Red Umbrella Fund to be here because Red Umbrella Fund is a global fund for and by sex workers. We need to hear how it's going, how it's not going, so that we can continuously improve to try to respond to the needs of our movement and learn. My first name is Paul-Gilbert. I work as coordinator of Red Umbrella Fund. Coordinator, that means that I'm a paid staff, part of the secretariat. Red Umbrella Fund is not me. Red Umbrella Fund is its grantees, the movement, the board, the program advisory committee. You will have met a lot of people at this conference. Many are part of the board as well. You might have seen Philista and Luca, they're board members of Red Umbrella Fund. Do you, all of you know Red Umbrella Fund? Yes? Does anyone not know Red Umbrella Fund? Right, so if I ask someone, what is the mission of Red Umbrella Fund? Can someone tell me? Sorry? Improve the sex worker community. And donating funds to the sex workers community. Indeed, it's very similar to that. The formal way to put it is that we say we are there to catalyze funding to sustain and strengthen the sex workers' rights movement. Catalyze funding, what does that mean? That means that we don't have funding by ourselves. We need to fundraise to then redistribute that funding. And I'll tell you a little bit more about this in a few seconds. Do you know how old Red Umbrella Fund is?
It's as old. It is as old as Margot St. James was. Like it happened when. No.
Fairly recent. It's 10 years old this year. So this year, later this year, to celebrate the anniversary, we might have a new website coming up on Sex Worker Pride Day on the 14th of September. 10 years ago, do you know why we were created? Because there is no money, not enough money for sex workers organizing.
Did the money come from?
Nope, there was no money from. Okay. So we were launched 10 years ago because of the movement and the fierce advocates in the movement. Representatives of sex worker-led organizations and networks, including an SWP, met with several donors, including HIV donors, saying this because we're at an HIV conference, to say there's not enough funding. The language hasn't changed a lot since. And to say when there's very few funding, this funding is always directed by the donor's priorities. It's HIV funding, it's violence funding, but there's so much more to our lives. I would like to have a safe space to meet my colleagues. That doesn't meet the donor's requirement of me being tested, for instance. And so these networks met with several donors to say, we need a fund for and by sex workers that gives core flexible funding to sex worker-led organizations so that the funding responds to their priority. And they don't have to reorganize or reshape the language to try and turn it into an HIV proposal or a violence proposal. It is the priorities of the sex worker-led organizations. And so some funders, I'll speak of open society foundations, for instance, were like, yep, let's do that. And so we had to launch a call to say, we have this great idea, who can host us? Because we couldn't be independent from the start. And there was also a feeling that we need a hosting organization to spend less on staff, rent, etc. We need the money to go out the door to sex worker-led organizations. And 2 organizations applied, and Mama Cash was chosen to be the host organization of Red Umbrella Fund. Mama Cash is the oldest feminist funder in the world, which is based in Amsterdam. They also fund sex worker-led organizations. If you don't know them, have a look at them, get in touch with them. And so for the last 10 years, we've been at Mama Cash and we've grown quite a bit. So what do we do now? We do 3 things. What is one thing we do? We've already said we give grants. We call it fundraising, we call it grant making and accompaniment. That means that we give 2-year core flexible funding to sex worker-led organizations. We do that through an annual call for proposal that is open every year. And then these applications are reviewed by a program advisory committee, and I will speak about the different bodies of Red Umbrella Fund. One part of Red Umbrella Fund's work on grant making and accompaniment that is not well known, and that I would like you to speak about with the different sex worker-led organizations that you know, is the accompaniment. It's not only for sex worker-led organizations that receive funding from Red Umbrella Fund. If your organization is sex worker-led and wants a second pair of eyes on an application that you're going to send to another donor, if you see another donor and the language is not understandable, or you want to check that you're eligible, get in touch with Red Umbrella Fund. We don't receive enough of these demands, and we want to be there to support that. So grant making and accompaniment. Oh, yes, Natasha.
Most of the funding are done
What?
Canada.
Indeed, there are geographic restrictions. So there was a comment saying most of the funding is not available for Canada. Facts.
Yeah.
So do you want me to speak about the geographic restrictions? Yeah. So again, Red Umbrella Fund is a fund for and by sex workers. It's important for you to know who to speak to, so that you can influence the decisions that are made at Red Umbrella Fund. The board, the International Steering Committee, reviews every year the application guidelines that the Program Advisory Committee, the body that reviews the application, will use to decide who gets funding. Let's talk numbers. Red Umbrella Fund is the 2nd biggest human rights funders on sex workers' rights. We have 3.5 full-time equivalent staff. Just so that we realize again, once more, and we all know that the funding is not there for sex worker-led initiatives, including the global sex worker-led. Sorry?
One of the lucky ones.
One of the lucky ones. An annual budget, for instance, our annual budget is around 1,500,000 euros a year. And we fundraise every year, and more than 70% of that budget is then redistributed in 2-year core flexible grants. Where does the other 30% go? Staff salaries, but also making sure that we remain sex worker-led. So a meeting of the board, the global board, different sex worker representatives from around the world, payment for the program advisory committee members that review the applications and have a lot of work. Just to give numbers again, last year we received 264 applications from around the world. And Red Umbrella Fund gives 30 grants a year. So we're a drop in the ocean, and we clearly don't match the need. And there are geographic restrictions as well. So the board has decided that not all the funding should go to Asia Pacific or Africa or Canada. They have decided that 30% of the funding available in one year should go to regional networks. Talk louder than this? Okay. Why? Because with money comes tensions, disagreements, comes a lot of responsibilities. We wouldn't want to put regional networks in a position where they're competing with their members for funding. Once that 30% is reserved for regional networks, the rest should be divided approximately equally between regions as defined by the International Steering Committee. The list of international steering committee members is on the website. If you want to speak to these people, it's possible. Felista is at the conference, is on the international steering committee, Luca as well. The different regions include Africa, and we receive more than half our applications from Africa. Asia Pacific, Canada, USA, Europe, and Latin America, and the Caribbean non-English speaking. Yes, sir. That has come into the discussions at the board, and that comes up every year. So again, speak to the INC members, influence, to remember so that we're reactive to the populations and the needs that the global movement produces. Right, I spoke about grant making and accompaniment. For flexible funding, 2 years, accompaniment that is not known well enough. We can support any sex worker-led organization with applications if they want to. We are limited in languages. We have 3.5 full-time equivalent staff. We have capacity to work in English, French, Spanish. We also work in Russian, but we need the support of a translator for this. We do not have a Russian speaker at the secretariat. The board last year took the decision that from next year, we will also receive applications in Chinese. And that was part of the conversations about Asia Pacific, for instance. How do we make sure that such a big country that is China is able to receive some of these funds? So that's our core existence, grant making and accompaniment. And then we do a bit of funder advocacy. What does that mean? That means that I've been running around at this conference and the board and the different secretariat members to speak to funders. And again, Red Umbrella Fund is a fund for and by. We can't do that ourselves alone. If you speak to your funders, and I've seen quite a lot of funders at this conference saying, core flexible funding is great. Sex worker-led initiatives are great. A sex worker-led fund, that's super great. And when I come and speak to them individually and ask, you can give to Red Umbrella Fund, we will redistribute it. They start again with arguments from 10 years ago saying, oh, but it needs to be programmatic, that needs to have an indicator on HIV. And we can't accept that anymore. So Red Umbrella Fund was born 10 years ago, at the same time as the Robert Carr Fund, at a similar time than the International Trans Fund, for the same reasons that are being told today by donors. They say, we don't have the systems to give to you. And then I'm like, yeah, sure. Are you able to give directly to sex worker-led organizations? We don't do funder advocacy only for Red Umbrella Fund, but also for them to fund directly. And no, they can't give funding to unregistered organizations. And that was the issue 10 years ago. And that's why funds like Red Umbrella Fund, like the International Trans Fund, were created. And so when funders say things like this, I would encourage you to say again, there are other mechanisms that were created, including by funders yourself, to go away to challenge these challenges.
What you just think about grassroots.
Sorry, I don't mean to take the mic literally. The point you made about grassroots organizations is, I think, really astute, because often the grassroots organizations are the ones doing more effective work in their communities because they are led by the people who are directly impacted or have that experience. And Swap Hamilton has faced this, and we were actually advised by the former organization in our city, Big Susie's, to not ever incorporate because of the problems that come with that overhead of labor, of annual general meetings, et cetera, et cetera. But we've sort of had this limbo because of being grassroots. We can do a lot of work, but only in a certain capacity. So yeah, thank you for saying that.
Thank you. So again, I want to stress once more, if your funders, ask them, are you funding community-led organizations? At what level? Why not 100%? If they say they're not able to do that, redirect them to Red Umbrella Fund. We're a mechanism for them to be able to do that. If they don't want to do that, then there's something that's not matching between the words and the actions.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge that we had 10 years ago and that we solved 10 years ago. They can't come back with the same reasons now with funding that's decreasing again for the sex workers community. So that's part of the funder advocacy work. We will try to speak to funders so that they fund sex worker-led organizations directly. If not, can they fund Red Umbrella Fund? If they already fund sex workers organizations, can they fund more? Can they fund better? And by that, we mean funding at all levels, regional networks, national networks, local organizations, to strengthen the movement. We will not say give money to Red Umbrella Fund and don't give money to sex worker-led organizations. You need to give funding to sex worker-led organizations and the fund so that we can be more independent, make our decisions, including in terms of funding. Grant making and accompaniment, funder advocacy. And our third strategy is sex worker leadership in grant making. That's to try and ensure that we remain sex worker-led in all our bodies. That's why we were created. If we're not sex worker-led anymore, we don't have a role anymore. So what is Red Umbrella Fund? What are these bodies? Do you know any of these bodies? I said I'm a coordinator, so I work at the Secretariat. The Secretariat is the paid staff member who implement the decisions, try to make sure things happen. We are 3.5 full-time equivalent staff members, and a majority of us have sex work experience. With COVID, we've learned, we've changed, meaning that we're based in Marrakesh in Amsterdam, but now we're working remotely, and that has allowed us to work towards being a bit more representative of our community. And now we have a colleague from Nairobi, and we will soon recruit another colleague who's a migrant and works between 3 different countries. Still work to be done. There will always be work to be done to do better. And I encourage you to always push for this message at Red Umbrella Fund as well. You are the watchdogs of Red Umbrella Fund. The Secretariat, the International Steering Committee, the board, 11 people, 8 sex worker members with geographic earmarks. Why? To make sure that not all 8 people are from France, not all 8 people are from Kenya. So there are different seats per region, 8 sex worker members and 3 donor seats. These donors that are on the board need to give significant multi-year funding to Red Umbrella Fund. Otherwise, you need to pay to get the service. One of these donors is the American Jewish World Service. Another one is Wellspring Philanthropic Fund. And the third one is Mama Cash. Mama Cash, because it's our host organization. So they help us know our limitations as well. So if the board was to say, oh, we need to make, instead of 30 grants, 200 grants, we don't have any finance staff. So Mama Cash would say, sorry, we're not able to do that practically. So that's the board, the people who make the decisions, who approve the policies, who review the application guidelines, where the geographic earmarks are, influence them, talk to them. Secretariat, International Steering Committee member, and the Program Advisory Committee. The Program Advisory Committee are the people who review the application. So let's speak about an application first. We receive applications. Once a year, we open the call. When we open the call, there is a period at the beginning of the opening of the call when we say, if you want to work together with the Secretariat on your application, take this opportunity. We're there to support you. If a question doesn't make sense, we can again be a second pair of eyes. Don't use acronyms that a PAC member will not understand. Describe your context to make the PAC member understand your context. Again, this opportunity is not very much taken. I would like it to be more taken. So the Secretariat then reviews eligibility. What is an eligible organization? It's an organization that agrees with the values of Red Umbrella Fund. Sex work is work, decriminalization of sex work. It's an organization that is sex worker-led. More than 60% of the people on the board need to be sex workers. More than 60% of the spokespeople for the organization need to be sex workers. More than 33% of the people on the staff need to be sex workers, remunerated at the same level than any other staff. And so then the Secretariat will review eligibility. But we're working from our computer. An organization can say anything. And that's where we rely on the movement once more. We're only as strong as the movement. And that can be misunderstood at Red Umbrella Fund as well. To be eligible, an organization needs to receive positive references from other sex worker-led organizations. Positive doesn't mean, yes, we recommend them for funding and they do a great job, because then that creates tension to have to judge another organization. You know, it's just about confirming eligibility. Is this organization really sex worker-led? Do they really work to benefit the sex workers movement and don't have programs that are damaging for us? And so sometimes that's not clear, because then when we send the decisions that are made, that is always challenging. 30 grants for 264 applications raises tensions. And some of these organizations receive a message saying, you were not eligible. And then we'll rightly say, what the fuck? I don't understand what does eligibility mean. It can mean that the references didn't respond on time, that we didn't manage to get positive references for these organizations. Unfortunately, that does exclude some organizations. For example, in the MENA region, there's very few sex worker-led groups that are starting. And we need to connect with them. Middle East, North Africa. Because if that organization that is starting in Tunisia or in Algeria is just starting and applies to Red Umbrella Fund, but they haven't connected with other movements, we won't be able to get the positive references, and that's a shame. Okay, so we have the applications. The eligible applications go to the Program Advisory Committee. The Program Advisory Committee is 11 people, again, with geographic earmarks, so that not all the 11 people come from France, Kenya, South Africa, Canada, so that it's divided across the world. And we say publicly that in the bank, more than 80% of people have sex work experience. That's what we say, to leave the people who are not out the possibility not to be out. These people you will not find on our website. That's a decision from the International Steering Committee. And that's to try and be a bit fairer, so that all applications are reviewed based on the application. And so that you know, you can't influence based on the call, based on who you're friends with. That would give too much power that other organizations might not have, particularly organizations that work in another language that is not their mother tongue. The Program Advisory Committee reviews the applications, a lot of work, and make decisions on who gets the grants. If an organization does not get a grant, it does not mean it's not doing great work. It's the limitations of the 30 grants per year. Is there any question on the work of Red Umbrella Fund so far? Grant making and accompaniment, founder advocacy, and sex workers leadership in grant making. Yes?
मैं आपसे क्वेश्चन पूछूंगी, आप इंग्लिश में दे दीजिएगा, मैं समझ जाऊंगी। ओके, मैं ये पूछना चाहती हूँ कि जैसे मैंने अभी अपना नया कलेक्टिव बनाया है, सेक्स वर्कर कलेक्टिव, वो रजिस्टर्ड नहीं है, तो क्या रेड अम्ब्रेला फंड नॉन रजिस्टर्ड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को भी फंड देता है?
Can unregistered organizations receive funding from Red Umbrella Fund? Yes. Again, if you speak to funders and they tell you, which I've heard several representatives of sex worker-led organizations saying to their donors, you're not accessible, you need to do better. If they tell you we fund registered organizations only, they don't do enough, then they should give to Red Umbrella Funds for the money to go to also unregistered organizations. So Red Umbrella Funds funds registered organizations. Unregistered organizations can fund in any country in the world.
मैंने ANSW में थी जब रेड अम्ब्रेला फंड पे काम किया है, रेड अम्ब्रेला फंड हमें मिला था। अभी मैंने हम नया कलेक्टिव बनाया है, तो जब हम एप्लीकेशन डालते हैं तो आप इंडिया वाले जो संगठन है उनसे आप पूछते हैं कि ये वाला जो कलेक्टिव है ये इंडिया में है या नहीं है, ये लोगों को आप जानते हो या नहीं जानते, तो आप वो लोग हमारे बारे में आपको बोलेंगे कि हाँ इनको दे दीजिए फंड, हम जानते हैं, तो ही फंड मिलता है। अगर वो लोग मना करेंगे कि नहीं ये तो नया है, हम इनको नहीं जानते, ऐसा होता है तो क्या फंड नहीं देंगे?
I'm sorry, I'm just translating her. She's saying she has open, like, she has created one network as a Azad Tikriya in India. So there is a representation of different sex workers from the different regions. So there is a one, a smaller group. It's more about a collective. So she said, if my collective would write some grants to you, Red Umbrella, so are they giving to smaller group also, or they just giving the bigger network, or they will ask bigger network whether they should be given to this network or not?
Thanks. मुझे थोड़ी हिंदी आती है. Red Umbrella Fund gives funding to any sex worker-led organization, including sex worker-led organizations that have not received funding before. On the application guidelines, it explains which category of organization, what kind of range of funding you can apply for. So an organization that shows that they have experience managing multi-million budgets will be able to apply for more funding than a nascent organization, but a nascent organization can receive funding from Red Umbrella Fund. And then on the collectives, that's an interesting one because we let the movement decide. What does that mean? That means that we receive applications from individual organizations. At the moment, we've not received applications or made it possible to receive consortium applications. If that's something that you would like to see Red Umbrella Fund change, speak to the International Steering Committee. Several countries have organized differently. I know of one country in Africa where the national network spoke to its members and they decided together that the national network would apply, and then in their program, they would redistribute the money to the different organizations. You can also decide not to do that. One point of attention, though, is the reference process. You remember, to be eligible, the organizations need to receive positive references from other sex worker-led organizations and allies, but definitely other sex worker-led organizations. And so if there's a country with 50 sex worker-led organizations, it's possible that Red Umbrella Fund will get in touch with these other organizations to say, hey, this organization is asking for funding. Are they who they say they are? And the aim is not to create tension. It's to realize where we apply, how many of us there are, where we can work together, if that's possible or not. One thing to know as well, because there were questions on the reference process. The movement has tensions, that's fine. If you don't want Red Umbrella Fund to get in touch with a particular organization because we have issues with them, indicate that. You might have plenty of reasons to have issues. But you also need to know that when you put organizations as references, Red Umbrella Fund will not necessarily contact these references. Why? Because we don't know the entire world. So organization X could say, my reference is this small group, organization A, and they're definitely sex worker-led. And we'll be like, weird, we've never seen them before. So we'll tend to go to organizations that have received grants in the past so that we know, or that are very known. Through the grapevine, yes. And that's a process that's replicated throughout Red Umbrella Fund. That's why we depend on the movement. Same when we look for International Steering Committee members. These people need to have reference letters from the movement. When there's a call for Program Advisory Committee members, these people need to have reference letters from sex worker-led organizations in the movement. We are bigger than individuals. Can I check if online there was any question or anything that wasn't clear? Should we speak about sustainability? I would like to take this opportunity to think together. I said Red Umbrella Fund's budget is about 1,500,000 euros a year. To raise that budget, we need to speak to a variety of donors, meaning that this year, to have this budget, We have 12 donors. That means 12 different reports that need to be sent. This year, we're doing okay financially. We hope to distribute more than 1 million euros in core flexible funding. Next year, we're doing okay. And then we go to conferences like this, and they speak about what about in 5 years? What's your sustainability plan? What will you do? And it's very difficult for the International Steering Committee to speak about the future because we raise funding every year and we redistribute it. So whilst we're okay this year and next year, in 2024, if we want to keep a similar budget at around 1 million that goes in grants, euros, we have only 56% of the funding secured. In 2025, we have only 16% of the funding secured. Why? Because we work in philanthropy and our grants are 1 to 2 year old, and that's not acceptable. If donors want to strengthen the movement, including the sex worker-led fund, we need bigger grants so that the board can really take long-term decisions for the fund. Sorry, the company.
Is there any opportunity for investments to be made with any of the funds to sort of provide like capital in the interim between when you receive the funds and when you grant the funds, like so that you could make money off of your money while it's just waiting there in the account?
What? All right. Stocks and mutual funds and bonds. I don't know, just a thought.
It was discussed a little bit, a tiny bit, and there's some limitation. Because we're hosted by Mama Cash, our funds are ours, but we share Mama Cash's bank accounts. So their policies on their risk affect us. And Mama Cash, including Red Umbrella Fund, have a policy of not stacking funds.
Yeah.
They're there to redistribute it. We take it, they redistribute it, and they don't want to keep it in the bank for future.
Can any transit organization apply for this grant? So trans women who are into sex work?
Right. That allows me to speak about the grant making priorities. I said that Red Umbrella Fund provides core flexible funding. That doesn't mean that there's no priority, but that does mean that it's core flexible funding. So what are the priorities that Red Umbrella Fund wants to see? Red Umbrella Fund will ask questions about how organizations involve marginalized people within the community itself, for these organizations to be prioritized. Marginalized doesn't mean the same thing in every context. So all applicants are first invited in the application form to reflect on the movement in their context. Who is there, who's not there at the table, who should be there, who suffers the most challenges, and why? And then the next question is, okay, you've told us that, how do you involve these people in your organization? Another grant making criteria, for instance, will be, how is your decision making? Is it shared leadership? How do you make sure that you take decision and that it's not one person? So you see the criteria are not, you should work on HIV, you should work on violence. It's, are you accountable? How do you involve people? One eligibility criteria is that we provide funding to sex worker-led organizations whose mission is to benefit the sex worker-led community. What do we mean by sex worker-led? 60% of people with sex work experience on the board, 60% spokespeople, 33% of the staff. Gay organization saying we're an MSM-led organization or gay organization, and we're having a project with sex workers would not be eligible if they're not, if they don't have the 60% of people with sex work experience, and if their mission is not about benefiting the sex work community, because there's so few funding available that our funding is definitely for the sex worker-led organizations. Trans-led organizations that have a majority of people with sex work experience, as described before, and whose mission is wider than trans people. If the mission is trans sex workers, the organization would be eligible on that point for funding for Red Umbrella. Would. That's a decision of the board to keep at least 70%, it's usually more than 70% going to grants. Oh, for staff, why is it the percent? Okay. Why is it that low? Yes. I think when the eligibility criteria were defined originally, they were influenced by NSWP's criteria for what a sex worker-led organization is. That changed over time as it was influenced. It can still be influenced at any time.
Okay. And it is about 10 years.
It is about 10 years old, so.
And what would the NSWP like to see today if they had control over what percentage of staff at the Red Umbrella Fund were sex workers? Okay. All right. How about you?
What would you like to see as a percentage for organizations receiving funding?
At least 50%.
So just so that you know, these conversations are also helpful for me because I remember, take notes and bring that to the board as well. But do speak with board members as well. Yeah. What would you like to see as a percentage of staff members with sex work experience? Can I ask you? Yeah. At least 50. 50, 60, 80%.
I don't mean to be a devil's advocate. I personally don't disagree, but I feel like, if you have 100% sex worker led, there's a lot of infighting. Like, and there's potential tensions that could, and so I like the balance.
I wouldn't agree with that at all. Like our movement in Australia is 100% sex worker led, and we're very united. And you know, we have our membership. We work together. We collaborate, and it's multiple organisations, all 100% sex worker led.
I'm only speaking specifically in the context of the limited capacity of the fund to give funds, and I would consider the potential competition, like the way that the decisions are made, that potentially could affect that. That's what I'm saying, and I could be incorrect, and I'm.
I don't think you're incorrect. I think the piece of information that is missing, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the people who are making decisions at the Red Umbrella Fund are all sex workers. Like Paul-Gilbert doesn't make the decisions about who gets the front, who gets the money. That's the PAC, yeah? It's the committee of sex workers, so it's already 100%. It's more like everybody else that's involved. So it's 100% sex workers making decisions.
That was unclear. I apologize. Thank you for providing clarity.
Yes, and we say publicly that the program advisory committee is 80% or more people with sex work experience, just to leave the option for people who are not to be out. Is there anything else you would like to know about Red Umbrella Fund that we should speak more about? Is there any question online? Okay. Right. In 45 minutes. If you want to speak to Red Umbrella Fund, Luca is here, Felista is here, I'm here. Don't hesitate. Get in touch online. If you're applying for other funding, get in touch. We can support you to do that as much as we can. Thank you very much.